You guys have to worry about all the stuff you'll have to deal with as you get older, but not me. I'm Peter Flippin' Pan.
If I were no longer Robin, that would mean that no more innocent people were being threatened.
What we're doing here, it's mythic. They'd have to pry the game out of my cold, dead fingers before I give it up.
I'd ask my mother's advice, and then do the opposite. I have no idea how much of what's in my head is from her or from me. I don't understand the question. I am normal. It's the rest of the world that's weird. I'd give anything to be normal. You guys have parents and outside lives. I'm jealous. To die would be a great adventure.
I know this might seem a little excessive, dedicating an episode this long to 2 issues, but trust me, it could have been more. When I was first planning this series, I fully intended to discuss only issue 7, my favorite single comic book issue of all time. It's a major influence on me as a writer and really helped to shape my worldview when I was a teenager, so obviously I have a lot to say about it. But then, while I was doing my reread leading up to this project, I came to the conclusion that I really can't talk about the big, interesting, important themes of issue 7 without also talking about issue 6, because they really are 2 sides of the same coin. These issues mark the moment when the ongoing series finally got its pieces in place, ironed out the kinks, tied up the loose ends, and was ready to make a statement about the team's central identity and what the book would be going forward. And oh boy, did they ever make a statement. Issue 6 runs a bit non-chronologically, but its story picks up right where issue 5 left off, with the Justice League confronting YJ, specifically the boys, as the girls haven't technically joined yet, about their recent reckless behavior. There's some cute fourth wall leaning here when it's pointed out that they're perceived as a junior Justice League but act, quote, more adult when they're apart. Which makes sense. The Robin, Superboy, and Impulse ongoings were all aimed at the assumed standard comic audience of men in their 20s and 30s, while YJ is explicitly targeting a younger teenage audience. The Super Cycle revs in with an emergency alert, which, after some posturing between Impulse and Flash, who really didn't get along at the time, turns into a challenge. The boys have 22 minutes to deal with the threat by themselves. If they can't, the team will either be stuck with a Justice League chaperone for all their assignments, or scrapped entirely. The boys arrive at the scene to find a 3-eyed purple monster called Despero attacking a carnival. Despero is a Justice League villain with a fair bit of history behind him, but all you need to know here is that A, he's an alien tyrant who B, got his spirit removed from his body under complicated circumstances, and was C, last seen in spirit form bothering Supergirl. His deal at this point is possessing other people's bodies, but using his psychic powers to project an image of himself to anyone he can see. So, while Young Justice and their local innocent standbys can see him just fine, the Justice League, who have sent an invisible Martian Manhunter along to keep an eye on things despite previously saying that they trusted the boys to handle it, only see them taking on ordinary citizens and causing more trouble. Meanwhile, Cassie and Sissy are stuck back at the cave, supposedly to get to know the Justice League since they're both more recently established compared to the boys. But in practice, they're being ignored while the League spies. Cassie gets a heart-to-heart with her mentor Wonder Woman where she admits that the reason she's not wearing Donna's old Wonder Girl costume is because she's afraid of ruining or shaming it. Diana expresses her concern that the team is too undisciplined for Cassie to join, and though it's clear that Cassie wants to object, she just can't. She's too overwhelmed. Back at the carnival, Secret is revealed to have snuck along in one of Robin's smoke pellets and confronts Despero herself while the boys deal with some freed circus animals. Despero, who's doing all of this to lure out a suitable superhuman to possess instead of normal mortals, peers into Secret's mind, only to recoil in horror, calling her the Abyss. Secret has no idea what he's talking about, but this is the first real hint we get that there's something more to her than just being made of smoke. Shit soon hits the fan as Despero manages to lure an unaware Manhunter into the open and possess him instead. With their connection cut off, the League wants to interfere against the terms of their agreement, and Arrowette, finally tired of being ignored, loses her shit. You want them to fail. Admit it. You just want to crab. You even complain about how the guys act when they're hanging with each other. So they rank on each other, razz on each other. That's how normal teen guys are. Didn't you guys have buds or sibs when you were teens? Guys you could bust on and know it didn't mean anything? No, probably not. I bet none of you can claim to knowing what a normal teen life is even supposed to be. Jeez, you're so judgmental it makes me want to puke. And that, folks, is what we're here for. Okay, yes, the attempt at teenage slang is kinda cringy and weirdly out of place since the kids don't really talk like that outside of this moment, but it's the content of the speech that's really important. See, right before this issue came out, there was a 3-issue JLA Titans crossover event called The Technus Imperative, which features basically the entire DCU. At the end of it, there was a brief moment in which Young Justice posed the question: if the JLA is the ultimate team, and the Titans are the ultimate family, then what does that make us? This issue and the next hold the answer. Young Justice is not a junior Justice League. They're not a service organization or a symbolic union of respected heroes or whatever you think the Justice League represents, nor are they some offshoot of the League, Black Ops or otherwise. Sure, they fight crime and solve cases together, but that's not what the team is about. Like Sissy says, they're here mostly to hang out and just be kids together with other kids who can better understand what they're dealing with. Fighting crime is just the thing that they have in common, like an after-school program. So then, does that make them a family? Well, no, because as we'll see in issue 7, these kids don't need any more family. They have a surplus. But for the moment, Sissy says her piece, including blowing Wally off when he rather cluelessly tries to compare them to the Teen Titans, and storms off, followed by Wonder Girl. Cassie helps Arrowette breathe through the minor panic attack she's having over yelling at her childhood heroes, and they pretty easily get over the minor antagonism that had been building between them. It's the start of a beautiful friendship, as well as jettisoning the idea that they might be in a love triangle with Superboy to everyone's relief. Back at the fair, the boys work together to expel Despero from the Manhunter's body, and Secret, makes him disappear somehow. Put a pin in that for the next book. Back at the cave, the League has had a change of heart, Robin continues to lie like a motherfucker about Secret's presence, and the JLA officially grants the team permission to keep using the cave, provided that Red Tornado, as their now official adult supervision, hosts a parent-teacher conference. Because in addition to being the youngest members of their respective superhero clans, all of these kids, except for Secret, actually have civilian families. Which leads us into issue 7, in which 2 storylines run concurrently. In the first, the team goes camping in full costume as a bonding exercise. Meanwhile, Red Tornado hosts the parent-teacher conference at the cave. In attendance are Bonnie King-Jones, the original Miss Arrowette and Sissy's mother, Dublex, a DNA-alien whom you might remember from the cartoon, representing Cadmus's interest in Superboy, Max Mercury, Zen Master of Speed, Impulse's legal guardian and the closest thing he has to a father in the modern age, and Helena Sandsmark, Cassie's mother and the curator at the Gateway City Museum of Cultural Antiquities. As previously noted, Helena doesn't really approve of Cassie's superheroic ambitions, which immediately puts her at odds with Bonnie, who of course pushed Sissy into the job and is more concerned with marketing Young Justice than she is with the dangers they might face. This soon devolves into a fistfight, which is only broken up by the arrival of Nightwing, who's here playing Big Brother because, quote, Batman couldn't make it. Tim at this point does have a civilian family in his father and stepmother, but they don't know that he's Robin and wouldn't find out until well after this series ended. The struggle to balance his superheroic and civilian lives was a long-term driving theme in the original Robin series, and it'll bleed over even more here as time goes on. Back at the campout, a game of Truth or Dare leads into some amusing shenanigans, including Impulse being unable to stay quiet for even a minute, and Robin being dared to remove his mask, only to reveal a second mask underneath. That in turn leads into one of my favorite sequences, a serious discussion about whether or not any of them would ever give up the superhero game. This talk only lasts 3 pages, but it's one of the best examples of succinctly establishing character motivation that I've ever seen. Yes, it's basically a series of short monologues, but they're damn good monologues that don't linger for more than a panel and exhibit the absolute best of the characters, the things that make them relatable, lovable, and real. We start with Robin, who says he'd drop the game in a heartbeat before clarifying that the only circumstances in which he feels he'd be free to do so is in a world that's become a utopia, free of crime and innocence being threatened. Which is kind of brilliant. Yes, it's another of his junior Batman acts, to the point where I'm pretty sure that Bruce has said the exact same thing in one past or another, but it's also very true to Tim's character. Despite the misinformation that sometimes gets spread, the fact is that Tim never wanted to be Robin. He just wanted there to be a Robin, because he believes that Batman needs one. And since Jason Todd was dead and Dick Grayson had moved on, Tim volunteered. His primary motivation has always been his strong sense of duty. Duty to his mentor, to his parents, to his responsibilities, to the world, and to his own sense of justice. So he's both putting on an act here and inadvertently being completely honest. He really would, and much later does, drop the game in a heartbeat if his responsibilities demanded it. But that same sense of responsibility inevitably draws him back in, whether it's what he really wants to do or not. After that comes Arrowette, who says that she would ask her mother's advice and then do the opposite, as she has no idea how much of what's in her head comes from her own will and how much of it comes from her mother's constant pressure. This is great on its own, but gets better when juxtaposed with how Bonnie is handling the parent-teacher conference. While it's made clear that Bonnie is an unreasonable diva of a stage mom who has no idea how much her parenting has damaged Sissy and doesn't even know that Arrowette got hurt fighting harm, she's also the only one who argues against hounding the kids with constant adult supervision. Her disregard of danger and superheroics is clearly not okay, but she also has faith in Sissy's ability to take care of herself and to make her own decisions. Provided they line up with what Bonnie wants too. Which, of course, raises the question. What's going to happen when Sissy decides that she doesn't want the life her mother has laid out for her? Wonder Girl's up next, giving the first of her stirring speeches, in which she essentially declares them to be inheriting the roles of mythical Greek heroes. This is the moment when I really fell in love with Cassie Sandsmark, and I don't think I'm alone in that. Her attitude mirrors that of many fans, capturing the excitement you'd expect to feel from living the superheroic dream. This is again contrasted by the reaction of her mother, who is perhaps overly concerned with the game's dangers to the point that she disregards her daughter's raw passion. It's a classic parental issue, wanting to keep your kids safe without stifling them, and Cassie's very teenage desire for chasing her dreams within her mother's limitations is equally classic and understandable. But I mean, for goodness sake, she was literally blessed by the gods. Who wouldn't be excited about that? Impulse's input is quick, flippant, and almost easy to dismiss. Of course he's not going to give up the game. Impulse isn't an alternate identity, it's just who Bart Allen is. It's who his family is, it's where his beliefs and desires come from, and he wouldn't be himself or even in this time period without it. But he's also at least vaguely aware that the real world isn't like that for other people, which begs the question of what will happen if and when the real world infiltrates his little bubble of obliviousness. Secret's part is likewise easy to understand. She doesn't even have the choice to give up given who she is and what she's hiding from, and for her that's much more of a burden than it is for Bart. But then we come to Superboy, who has his permanently stuck at 16 status revealed to the group. He immediately dismisses their sympathy and loudly declares how awesome it is to be a kid forever, shooting up into a sky with a crowing Peter Pan reference perfectly in keeping with his brash, bellowing personality. And yet, even as he leaves them behind, all his friends see right through the facade. And they're not the only ones. When he's left alone, Superboy grows pensive, imagining that his shadow grows up and leaves without him, leaving him truly alone. At this point, Superboy had been around for about 5 years and spent most of that time trying to find his place in the world. Despite joining or founding a few other teams and organizations, his only lasting companion was his girlfriend, Tana Moon, a much older reporter who would only continue to outgrow him as time went on. In this moment, we see that for all his posturing, Superboy is lonely. And maybe that's why he's keeping his posturing up around the others, to keep them at a distance. After all, every child eventually grows up. Except one. Back at the PTA night, the various guardians have agreed to their children's participation, only for the Mrs. Sandsmark and King to finally find common ground when they learn that the girls went on a co-ed campout. They storm off to confront them, but chill out when they check the girls' tent to find them being adorable and opt to lead any scolding for the morning, which leaves Superboy to his thoughts as we end off the collected book 1. And oh man, what an ending! This is where the original trade left off too, and I've gotta say, it's the perfect spot for it. This is one of the cleanest Act 1 breaks to ever grace the pages of a serialized narrative, and I can't stress enough how important that is to a good introduction arc. Over the course of 7 issues and 1 brief diversion, Young Justice cleanly establishes everything we need to know about this series going forward. Its themes, its tone shifts, its cast and their motivations, its team dynamics, their values, and most importantly, why we as an audience should care. We care because these kids, for all their fantastic powers and unearthly origins, feel real and relatable. We see their promise and their raw passion, and we want to see them thrive, to cheer them on as they overcome both the pressuring expectations of the world around them and their own personal demons. But ultimately, issue 7 is my favorite comic book because it feels like an invitation. All these kids want is to hang out with their friends and have some fun while occasionally kicking bad guy butt. And in this intimate little conversation where the world shrinks to only the light of a fire, we, the readers, are being invited to do the same. On Tumblr, before Tumblr imploded, my tag for the YJ kids is my dearest friends, because that's honestly what this series makes me feel. I was in middle school when I first found this team, and even now, reading a good issue will bring back memories of being that age and hanging out with my friends. That's what a really good YA series should do, capture the feeling of youth, of friendship and potential and rebellion and being young, just us. And Young Justice, for me at least, does that better than anything else, even as the first book ends and their adventures continue in Volume 2.